he's been appointed as recently he's been appointed as the first Vijay and Sita Vashi Chair in Climate and Sustainability at IIT Bombay. His areas of interest include circular economy, sustainability assessment, climate change mitigation, and adaptation. He has conducted and supervised research in many sectors like road transportation, urban water, and building material, and he will draw from these experiences to talk about challenges of enabling circular economy in India. Then we will have Dr. Richa Singh, who's a senior scientist at the UCD Center for Safety and Health at Work, University College Dublin. She also did her PhD in the same institution as Professor Pradeep in IIT Bombay, and then she worked in a policy think tank called Center for Science and Environment in New Delhi. She's been a visiting scholar at many institutes like TU Delft, NTNU, University of Lisbon, and so on. And her work has earned her many awards, such as the Newton Bhabha Award, DST, Inspire Fellowship, and so on. She will talk about her experiences in working with waste management, informal waste sector, and landfill remediation, and especially about the challenges in bringing research into policymaking. So the structure of this talk will be, we will start with 15 to 20 minutes talk by each of the speakers. And if you have any questions, meanwhile, you can always drop them in the chat. And after the talks, we will have an open discussion for 20 to 30 minutes, which I will be moderating. And we are recording the session for putting it up on the YouTube channel. So if you have any objections with it, you can also reach out to me or put it in the chat. So now I will hand over the floor to you, Professor Pradeep.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Soumya, for first of all inviting me and Dr. Richa to share our experiences on this important topic. And as this particular industrial ecology is a very broad area, and so we will bring in very small cases or experiences, and I think more of such seminars will help the young researchers to gauge the kind of topics that can be covered in this particular domain. So I'll share based on my experience from my PhD that I started learning LCA on my own in 2000, maybe 8, 9, and then until now how I reached to different ways of dealing with LCA and different ways of doing sustainability assessment, and what is contextual to India, that I will present more and bring out some of the examples from my research group that we have successfully completed. So I'll share my screen. So hope the screen is visible, and okay, let me do this. Okay, so I'll be talking from the lens of circular economy and overall life cycle thinking as a tool for gauging sustainability, let's say related discussions, that what is sustainable, what is not sustainable, can we quantify what is sustainable. So where we have reached to that particular discussion, and this is based on 4 students that who have worked with me for last 6-7 years in different timelines. So that their work I'm going to present. So and how we can couple material circularity and life cycle thinking, and why it is needed to couple, that I will explain. So I work in broadly sustainability assessment and resilience. That these are the 2 areas that have strong focus. Then circular economy, climate change mitigation, adaptation, and being environmental engineer and being in India where water is not addressed, water issues are not addressed, we cannot left it behind. So I also keep pushing this water supply and sewerage topics along. So these 2, and I draw the, let's say, learning from each other, that whatever I learn in sustainability assessment, I apply in water supply sewerage. And by applying the tools and methods to these sectors, I again improve the methods in this. So this is another way you can keep playing in your research, that you take a sectoral cases, apply the tools and challenge the tools, and it is beneficial to both the water supply sewerage sector and both also to the sustainability or industrial ecology domain. I will give some examples on this. A lot of teaching I do in IIT Bombay, just to tell what I cover. And Soumya did this course long back to the 1920, I guess, before she went to master's and PhD in this domain, sustainability assessment of urban systems, then urban environmental infrastructure, and very successful course we have been started for last 3 years, circular economy practices and policies with Professor Ajay Deshpande. I do this course, and urban water management is going to start soon. Some other courses I do contribute to. This is a basic slide where we all know we have to basically reduce the thickness of this linear economy, linear resource flow to circular resource flow, and shrink this particular flow. And that is the basic circular economy, let's say, target. But how to do that in an effective way? And while doing that, basically we should not create some more problems to environment. That particular, thinking we have to develop. uh, why I'm saying this, I will start with this particular very phenomenal paper that Professor Michael Hauschel and Anas Pion is also professor now in Technical University of Denmark. Both of them have come up with this very nice, very simple diagram which tells that eco-efficiency and resource efficiency may not go in hand in many sectors and examples. What does it mean is that while you increase the resource efficiency, your eco-efficiency may go down, and while you may try to again increase the eco-efficiency, your resource efficiency may go down. Those both of the things may not go hand in hand for many sectors. So we have to understand that while designing for sustainability, while thinking for sustainability, both of this thought process have to be applied separately, checked separately. Too much of resource or eco-efficiency may lead to technology or societal lock-ins or traps. That means you may apply a particular tool like LCA and analyze a particular system, and people will say, oh, this is the best technology, but that is from a limited perspective. And unless you expand the scope of analysis to a real market or economic sense, things will not be correct, and then there will be technology or societal lock-ins that people get let's say adapted to the entire that particular technology or product. When it comes to long-term development strategies, eco-efficiency offers no advice. What does it mean? That you have to understand that whatever you're analyzing from present data and present processes and present ways of doing things. It cannot determine how future will look like. Suddenly some innovative, disruptive technology or practice will come and it will change everything. So you are right now, you're just assessing the eco-efficiency from present data, and it is most of the times relative eco-efficiency, that A is better than B, hence people may jump on A, but A may not be sufficient to solve the crisis. So you have to look at from planetary boundary layer concept also. And we may end up optimizing systems that are inherently unsustainable. That means you're choosing a system which is highly coefficient, but as soon as you expand the system diagram or scope of analysis, you realize it's inherently unsustainable. We cannot promote that kind of system. Example is promotion of waste incineration instead of segregation. You may optimize, you may apply best of the best technology, and LCA may tell you, okay, this is the best energy recovery system, but inherently waste incineration cannot be promoted as a solution when segregation can give you much more other benefits for the problem, solving the problem. So do not fall. So the message to students is, do not fall in the traps of these assessments. So life cycle assessment is a fantastic tool because it is promised many things, that you account for everything: production phase, use phase, end of life phase, reuse, remanufacture, closed loop recycle. So how to quantify? In a data scarce situations like India, even in developed countries, it's very difficult to get data for all of the scenarios and situations. The spirit is very good of life cycle assessment, but implementation is very difficult. So we have to think for some other ways of doing things. So why I'm saying this, you have to look it from the temporal perspective, technological perspective, and geographical perspective, that whether the data that you're using for any kind of sustainability modeling, whether representative, because your data needed maybe this orange box. Sometimes you get this yellow box, which is too specific data. Sometimes you get this gray box, which is data not very specific. And most of the studies I see that get published or come for my review is data is not at all representative. Just because LCA softwares are available, databases are available, people keep doing LCA and publish. That should not be the spirit. As soon as I returned from Denmark, I have not done any LCA publication as a conscious decision, that it is not fruitful for Indian condition to jump on this when our own databases are not there. Because operational framework is very simple, that you define a goal and scope, and many people do not define the goal, the functional need also correctly. Inventories are halfway done, and then in software you do few clicks and you get the very nice impact assessment results, which very difficult to understand. And that's why I made this LinkedIn post where it is shown that the graph, everybody is attracted to these very nice graphs, but what is the meaning of those graphs? Is it simplifying the decision or whether it is complicating the decision? Because so many uncertainties in this kind of modeling, like cutoffs, allocation model, system boundary, incorrect functional innate, there are inherent modeling, so many models already used in the creating these characterization factors and many things. Weighing and normalization has itself bias. Single score is highly aggregated. I have some research done on why single scores doesn't make sense. So what we are getting at the end is highly uncertain result. So we have to be having that appreciation in mind. So what we can do in Indian context or developing country context, and why it is difficult to carry out sustainability assessment. Data is limited or scarce. Data validation is very difficult. Interpretation of results of LCA is difficult because replicability is not possible because everyone's data source is different and there are no references available. And although environmental impacts are important, there are other pressing priorities because see, sustainability doesn't mean only environmental problem. When you work in India, you'll understand environmental impacts are there and we are worried about that, but you have many other pressing priorities such as local context, governance, job creation. Because LCA may tell you that this is the best technology available, but local context may tell you that this is not possible to implement. It will fail. So what I use in my kind of research group is very simple framework of sustainability assessment that you do account few environmental impacts, but also see whether it is economically viable, beneficial to society, whether societal benefits such as job creation, local technology use, local practices can be incorporated where community acceptance will be there, where municipality and state governments will able to operate that systems which are there, which will quantify sustainability as a better solution, but governance also has to work out. And technically, it has to be applicable and ease of governance. So very simple indicator set you can work with, or these aspects you can work with. So way forward is you apply life cycle thinking. So I'm saying LCA you should not jump. Take a life cycle thinking perspective coupled with very simple tools such as carbon footprint. Simultaneously, in some cases, material flow analysis can be also a very good insight. In many city problems, material flow analysis, people do not know material flow. People know LC, but people forget about because that is completely missed out tool. And in my courses, I do teach material flow analysis. And then to arrive at overall sustainability, other indicators, representative economical, societal aspects should be integrated. And such criteria, pool of criteria indicator set like environmental, social, economic, circularity, technical, and resilience can be uh, pulled up for a given problem. That is what is called life cycle sustainability assessment. Okay, so we have given this as a book chapter. Those who like to have access, write to me. I'll share. This is very comprehensively we have written how sustainability assessment should be carried out. Now I move to cases. The first case I'm going to present is of applying this entire theory that I explained to urban transportation. This is the work that Dr. Deepjyoti Das, who is now postdoc in Chalmers, worked on urban transportation. What we did was we worked on an ASI approach, that is avoid, shift, and improve. That strategies for improving urban transportation, which will fall on the avoid pool, that avoiding something, shifting to something else, and improving the technology, like including the vehicle efficiency or choosing to EV or something, and what are the cascading effect of those on 14 cities in India. And this has led to very good publications also. So don't assume that, okay, if you do not do LCA, you will not publish. I'll show you so many publications without LCA we can publish in a very good journals. So hello. Yeah, sorry, something. So overall approach is we model the well to tank first, then measure materials involved in the vehicles, then tank to wheels, and we develop vehicle module, fleet module, emission factors, material flow module, electricity module, and then estimation of cumulative CO2 emissions to give a carbon footprint. So one of the strategies, EV we did assess, and EV, if you apply EV without, let's say, electricity generated from renewables, EV will induce more emissions. That results are also available. I'm not going to present. Then just a very interesting case of car sharing I'll show. That this is one of the best option of collaborative consumption in is car sharing. So two research questions we found, which is the best suited car sharing model. and what is the impact of identified car sharing model in trip emissions. So what we used was this scope 1 and scope 2 emissions and different modes of transportation. Uh, and we developed a dynamic stock model. And here is what research needs to be done. In India, we need to first understand the stocks available. So in Mumbai metropolitan region, what is the vehicle stock and what is the material stock available? And if we apply the car sharing model, whether the stock will change or stock will increase or decrease, that we determine. And some assumptions and details are there. You can refer to publications. So what interestingly it shown was when you apply car sharing to existing scenarios, it may reduce the emissions. But if you account for detouring is that you have to pick the number of people, then the emissions will increase initially. Also, there will be more shifts. That two-wheeler person may shift to four-wheeler. Person traveling in bus may shift to carpool. That will also induce. So when you are working on a circular economy strategy, you have to understand there will be cascading and rebound effects. So the overall effect of detouring masks the credits gained due to carpooling trips initial years, at least 2030, 40. So what it shows is there are counterintuitive results you expect when you apply circular economy coupled with life cycle thinking. And this is the slide where it shows that anything you do, whether you do electric vehicles, whether you do carpooling and public transport, there will be too much gap in the emission targets, national and global, and something dramatic and very different needs to be done at this level. So these are the key publications just to show that students that these are without doing LC, these publications are there. You have to define the problem correctly and you have to apply simple tools. The second sector is the construction and demolition waste, where Namya recently completed her PhD on this. Again, very quickly, I'll show that construction demolition is a big problem in India. Again, here we first of all screened out all the strategies available globally, and 30 the global demolition waste management strategies we screened out from global literature. And we mapped the effort in each strategy and the impact that can be created and for India. And these top 10 priorities for India we identified. And urban mining we further deepened using again stock model. So Namya first did this, and this paper is out also for circular economy. We choose Thane city for developing the stock model, building stock model. Thane is basically a shadow city of Mumbai, which is very near to, let's say, when Mumbai ends, Thane city starts. So, and typologies are like this. So different multi-story buildings, single-story buildings are also there. So a lot of modeling we did on these building materials, and she developed this spatial stock model. I have not given you the details how we arrived at it with the time limit. So different, so it shows that a major material accumulation of 3.14 tons per meter square, and per capita it is 14 metric tons per capita. So these kind of results will tell you what is the stock available and whether we can keep this stock inside the city instead of discarding it outside city boundaries. And what are the strategies that we can use to reutilize this stock. So Namya developed this material flow and market behavior assessment model, MALBA model, which is basically takes care of the building stock model of the from 1911 to 2050. What will happen? What are the existing buildings? What will happen to those? And what are the new buildings? And what are the market behavior of the products and the materials? All those scenario development she has done. And this particular Malba model is there. That is outcome of her thesis, which shows that what will happen to future materials in future. Burn clay bricks, concrete, what are their pathways, what are their resource flows. So without doing impact assessment also, even if you have a good insight about resources, a lot of policy input can be given for management. So these are the publications, more will come from Namya's work. So you can refer to. Then finally, again, water, as I said, it's very close to my heart. So Nikita and who completed PhD on this topic, and Shweta is just going to submit. Both of them very rigorously work on water sector, both water, circular economy and sewerage as a problem. So first, what we did is we defined the terms like what is reduce, recycle, reuse, reclaim in a context of water, because those definitions were also confusing. So it's again a review and definition paper and challenges paper of circular economy. You can refer to this paper where problems only defined and challenges were given. Then in the second work we did is quantification of circularity. So we have developed water circularity indicator, which is a mass balance based approach. So we developed the water circularity indicator and the tool is available also. And third work Nikita completed was prioritization of strategies. Because when you say, okay, I'm working on circular economy, but which strategy we should prioritize given a limited amount of funding and given very limited, let's say, resources available to municipalities. So we have come up with the prioritization strategies for circular economy also. So these are the key publications from Nikita's work on review, then measuring and prioritization. Then Shweta and I have developed the scale decentralization as a concept for because highly centralized infrastructure and highly decentralized infrastructure in Indian condition doesn't work or globally doesn't work. There has to be some scale of work, scale of economy. So again, simple sustainability parameters like life cycle cost, social benefits, recycling potential, resource recovery, ease of governance, environmental impacts, overall representing the sustainability and resilience as a new challenge and new commitment. So overall, there has to be some ideal zone of operation that we determine. So, and then how to scale the different infrastructure in the cities, that work Shweta has completed, and very nice video she has created on which is available for watching. How to integrate nature-based solutions, how to do the phase-wise planning for different scenarios, how to integrate nature-based solutions with the mechanized systems, and what are the life cycle cost benefit and what are the climate benefits by integrating nature-based solutions. She has quantified. This is the paper and the work that also how to use green roofs in the flood mitigation. So these are some policy articles that has emerged from the work on this water sector. So and this is some international collaboration. So overall, the one tool is we have developed decision support tool Jal Vishwa, which basically use this all the theory that I used told, like life cycle costing tool is also there, and technology selection for any technology, but specifically for water sector, you can use this tool. It's open source, anybody can use it, and this uses this kind of indicator set. uh, so overall, what message I'm giving is don't jump to very complicated tools when you don't have a very good accurate information from of the system. Do material flow analysis, do carbon footprint, apply life cycle thinking, and draw the policy support. Because by applying complicated tools with limited data, you may get some decision, but it will be with very high uncertainty. So I always appreciate what kind of models you are using, what kind of data set you are using, and what kind of policy support is expected. Okay, that the outcome that is you are giving has to be also digested by the end users. Else you will give a LCA result and the municipality does not know what to do with those LCA results. That kind of situation will be there. Okay, so that's what I wanted to pass on. Thank you. Back to you, Soumya.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting presentation, specifically highlighting challenges in India. So now I will directly give the floor to Richa, and then we can have a discussion after that.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Soumya. Let me share my screen first. I hope my slides are visible.
Yes.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be a part of this very important discussion via this webinar, and also to share something which is very close to my heart. I've started working in human biomonitoring and trying to explore the intersection between how I can use human biomonitoring in waste management sector, because the place I come from, of course, like it has huge scope, and at the same time so many challenges in waste management sector. When Soumya came to me, she said, why don't I present something on what are the the challenges in translating the scientific knowledge into the waste management sector and the waste management policies. And I really loved the idea, because we have worked on so many different aspects of Swachh Bharat mission, or which is also known as Clean India Mission Phase 2, where a huge focus is on landfill remediation, integration of informal sector, establishment of infrastructure for waste management, waste treatment, most importantly. And the vision is to create garbage free cities. But in general, what has been the obstacles or challenges in, and why the scientific literature, scientific information which is already there, why it's not getting translated into something concrete or some policy interventions. So I'd like to talk about that today, and in this discussion we'll try to explore the different challenges behind these gaps, and also try to I'm not sure if I can say so, but maybe a food for thought, to find a framework of for rethinking on how well we can plan, execute, and design a sustainable waste management system, which is not only environmentally sustainable but also socially inclusive. That is also one of the unique features of emerging economies like India, where we talk about three pillars of sustainability, but we often overlook the societal impact of any technology or the people who are getting affected by different waste management treatment technologies. So I'd like to start with the different, key challenges. There's so many challenges, out of which I have picked five challenges, and I'd like to focus on these five things today. First is the lack of credible and consistent data. I think this enough has been spoken about this important aspect by Professor Kalbar, and we know that the waste estimation, like any treatment technology or infrastructure or policy, will work only if it's backed up by precise data. I'll talk about this in the later slide, and explain it better. Reactive then proactive policy. So most of our policies in waste management sector is, it's reactive in nature, and these are not proactive policy approaches, because most of the time it is driven by the crisis management situations, institutional fragmentation and weak coordination between multiple agencies. So that is also something related to data management, because the data that we see today, for instance, you get real time data about how much is the waste generation, how much is the waste processing, what kind of waste is generated, how much of the legacy waste is lying in the dump sites or the landfill facilities. But then these are reported data, and based on certain averages or per capita generation, not scientifically sampled data. So poor enforcement and limited public awareness, especially on source segregation, which is the very heart of sustainable solid waste management in an emerging economy like India. The need for multidisciplinary and systemic approach that brings in voices beyond policymakers, because we have experts now. Is It's the high time when we need specialists in waste management sector. Of course, we need all the stakeholders, but we need specialists, not only the generalists who are taking important decisions about the policies. So let us first discuss about the data discrepancies. So if you see the Swachh Bharat Urban Dashboard, or the CPCB, which stands for Central Pollution Control Board, and it's a regulatory body which oversees all the environment related issues. They have their annual reports, and they publish how much waste is generated in the country. But you see a lot of discrepancy in there. So I will not go beyond 2014, because 2014 was the time when Planning Commission report was published, and they estimated that the annual generation of municipal solid waste in India was around 62 million tons. And they also forecasted that how much is going to be the waste generation in the subsequent years. For instance, by 2021 the waste was expected to be around 100 million tons. By 2050 it is expected to be around 436 million tons. Whereas the true story, like the record that we are seeing online, is it's completely different, because in 2021 the reported data by the Central Pollution Control Board was around 54 million tons. The current generation, if you go through the Swachh Bharat Mission Urban Dashboard, it is around 58 million tons. So this is an unexpected trend, because waste generation declining despite of India being the most populous nation. There is a rapid urbanization rate. It's among the fastest growing economies. This is something practically not possible. So logical expectation is, there will be waste generation is directly proportional to the rate of urbanization and the population growth. As we are growing, it is expected to increase, whereas from 2014 till today, the waste generation that we see today, which is given by the government, is, it is showing a declining trend. One can always debate that probably we have right now the policies which is actually helping in reducing the waste quantum, but that's my counter would be most of our policies, as I mentioned, are reactive, not proactive. Most of it is actually focusing on landfill remediation, waste treatment. So basically, it is talking about the bottom line. It is not talking about the upstream problem where you are trying to focus on issues like waste reduction. So if there is no waste reduction, we cannot expect a declining trend of waste generation. So that's an I mean, it's a massive problem, because of which a lot of infrastructural issues is happening now. You know that Swachh Bharat Mission Urban, there are fund allocation by the central government. If you look at the exact numbers, it's around 1 lakh 41,000 crores, so which translates to around 16.5 billion US dollars, just for remediating the landfills, scientific treatment of waste and wastewaters. So, but this is again the thing that is already created, the garbage mountains that has always already been created. So we are trying to remediate those. It's not about what new policies one should have, a country should have, to reduce the waste at the source itself, to make sure that the waste is segregated at the source itself, because once the waste is segregated, it becomes really easy for the urban local bodies to channelize them to the dedicated recycling facilities. So this is a snapshot from the urban SBM urban dashboard. Of course, the idea is to show that the waste processing is increasing with every year, but it's important to realize that look at the waste generation. It's the waste generation per day, tons per day. uh, it's impossible to believe this number. I mean, and that's also one of the issues most of the urban local bodies are struggling with, because if they have to apply for funding from the central government, they have to mention exactly how much is the per day waste generation, how much fund they would need to build an infrastructure which can cater the treatment of that much amount of waste. For instance, if it's 550 tons of organic waste every day, or wet biodegradable every day, and they need to establish a bio CNG plant, they need funds for that. But if they don't know how much exactly is the amount of waste they are generating every day, they end up overestimating or underestimating the funds for establishing the processing plants. Same holds true for the legacy waste dump site remediation. Most of the waste which is lying in the dump site areas or the landfill areas, there is no historical background about how much is the waste quantum. Even if you adopt certain technologies like contour mapping, it will always tell you the volume of the waste. Now it's very interesting because in fresh municipal waste you can still estimate how much is the mass and volume of the waste. But if it's dense, if it's a mix of heterogeneous mix of all sort of waste, including the completely biodegradable waste, moderately biodegradable waste, or completely non-biodegradable waste, it becomes really difficult for the urban local bodies to estimate the real density. And that's why they can't tell how much waste is lying in their landfill sites. So that also is a big issue, because that leads to um, issues or challenges related to the funding allocation by the state board, or by the state government or the central government. Now, as I mentioned, why waste data matters, because how good is your policy depends on how good is your data. So, initial planning also needs cities to have a clear waste data to plan their collection system, their fleet size, whether they are going to have compartmentalized vehicles or not, GPS, etc. Treatment plants, what all treatment plants they are going to have, and how much is going to be the capacity of the treatment plants, how much is going to be the landfill capacity. Then current issue, most cities use static per capita averages, ignoring diversity across different income groups, like we have low income groups, middle income groups, or high income groups, geographic variations and seasonal changes. And the consequences, as I already mentioned, is they often end up underestimating or overestimating infrastructural needs, and there are inefficiencies and missed opportunities in the process. Now, as I mentioned, most of our policies are reactive in nature and not proactive. So policies often respond to crisis, not prevent them. For instance, you must be hearing a lot about the landfill fires that is taking place every summers in Delhi. Now, while I was working with Center for Science and Environment, which is a policy think tank in India and is based in New Delhi, we were working very closely with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and there was a huge push about, clearing the landfill sites, because of course there was a lot of PILs filed because of the pollution caused due to the landfill fires, and every summer it used to happen. And if there is such kind of issue happening, the response pattern that we would see is firefighting, temporary control, quick fixes, public outcry, what to do, how do we solve this problem. But the major issue behind these for landfill fires was the dumping of wet biodegradable waste in these landfill sites, including Bhalswa, Okla, and Gazipur dumping sites in the capital city. Now imagine that this kind of fire outbreak happening. This is a real picture which we clicked from Okla dump site. So imagine that something like this is happening in a city where the air quality is already compromised. So the best way out, or the proactive strategy should be banning the disposal of wet biodegradable waste in the landfill sites. Because if we look at the solid waste management rules 2016, which is our the very foundation, or which I would say the bible of solid waste management in India, it strictly prohibits the dumping of anything which is recyclable in nature, anything which is biodegradable in nature, anything which is treatable in any form. So ideally only the residual solid waste, such as drain cells, or these kind of street sweepings, or the residue waste which is coming out of the recycling plants, should ideally end up into the landfill sites. Whereas if you see the current pattern, around 60 to 70% of the waste is actually ending up into landfills. And it's a very uh, how do I say that, it acts as a pollution hubs, because the landfill sites in India are very different than what it is in Western countries. Because the landfill sites in India are devoid of any pollution control mechanism. We don't have leacher collection systems, we don't have landfill gas collection system. So it's just a mere piece of land which is used for disposal of the waste. Of course it is controlled in nature. Right now whatever waste is going there is a weighbridge and everything is being documented. But the issue is with the if or the mixed waste which is unsegregated in nature. And that's why I did mention that source segregation is very heart of sustainable waste management. Why? Because if you are mixing the waste at the source itself, it becomes practically impossible to segregate it later, and then channelize the wet biodegradable waste to composting plant or biogas plant or bio CNG plant, and the dry waste in material recovery facility. So once it is mixed, most of the urban local bodies or Indian cities, they are actually disposing it off into the in their cities landfill facility, which is devoid of any kind of pollution control mechanism. And this basically creates a huge nuisance, not only to the environment, but also it has a huge socio-economic impact, because a lot of informal sector, a lot of waste pickers, a lot of people whose livelihood is dependent on waste, they live in the nearby areas in the close proximity of landfill sites, and they are constantly getting exposed to all sort of obnoxious gases. And during landfill fires, I can tell you from my experience, it's really sad. There was a school which was nearly 50 meters from Okla dump site, and it was a primary school where after the fire outbreak, it was shut for like months. But then, if any environmental engineer would know that if you're going to have a landfill facility, there are site selection criteria that one must have to follow. And it should not be near any residential complexes, any residential area, or any water bodies. So you name any sort of pollution, you will find it in in these dump sites. So it's a living hell. And we actually did a proxy estimation of, okay, if at all 1 ton of organic waste or biodegradable waste is reaching a landfill site, uncontrolled anaerobic decomposition is happening, and it will give around 54 kilograms of methane. That translates to 1500 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents. Now you imagine 62 million tons or even 58 million tons of waste. 50% of it roughly is biodegradable in nature, and that is all going to the Indian landfills. And how much methane would be produced in that process? Apart from that, other impact is, like, we have not done any study on what is the impact on the people who are living in the close vicinity of these areas. Now, Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0 and landfill remediation. Now, I'm a big time supporter of Swachh Bharat Mission phase 2, but at the same time, I would also agree that this is again a proactive, not a proactive policy, but a reactive policy, because the entire focus is on remediation of the landfills. And the long term vision of the government is to create an ecosystem which is not having any landfill facility. It's ideal to say that, but then even if there is a landfill facility, that should only be used for receiving the inert waste and the waste which cannot be treated in any way. And also creating garbage free cities by making sure that 100% of the waste which are generated in the cities are treated scientifically. So however, since 2 decades, we have been following the linear economy model of development, where the product is made and it is discarded into the landfills, and as a result, we have to deal with around 2,500 dump sites on landfills, which is an offshoot of waste mismanagement for decades, which are covering an area of 15,000 hectares. As of today, as we are speaking, the area that has been reclaimed because of the intervention of Swachh Bharat Mission is around 41% of the total area, and 59% is yet to be remediated. The deadline for Swachh Bharat Mission phase 2 is 2025 2026. So we have already reached towards the end of it, but still a lot significant amount of progress needs to be made. As per the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, around 2,490 lakhs, which translates to around 249 million tons of legacy waste, is lying in the dump sites. Now, legacy waste, I hope everybody is aware about it. It's nothing but the municipal solid waste which is lying in the landfills. And around 47% has been remediated, and 53% needs to be remediated. This is massive, and I think this is a lesson for us to understand that now is the time that we should not create landfills. So we have to, because for treating 1 ton of legacy waste, government is spending around, Indian cities is spending around 800 to 1200 Indian rupees, which is a massive amount just for. And I just can't say that we can have a circular economy model by reclaiming the dump sites. No, waste, once it is in mixed form, unsegregated, lying in the landfills, it is a liability. It cannot be converted into resource. Of course, there are mechanisms via which the Indian cities are making sure that whatever fractions they are recovering from the landfills after landfill remediation process, it needs to be channelized to the recycling facilities. For instance, a lot of fine soil-like material is recovered in the process of landfill mining. And for Delhi, for instance, MCD, Municipal Corporation of Delhi, has a memorandum of understanding with the National Highway Authority of India, and that fine soil-like material is transported to construction sites to be used in road construction. The SCF, which stands for Segregated Combustible Fraction, you can also call it RDF, is channelized to the co-processing cement plants, where it is used as a substitute of coal, and a secondary raw material. But at the same time, there is a lot of challenges on how this process needs to be done. So when this landfill mining, it gained momentum in India, it was the year probably 2017 2018. And after 2019, most of the Indian cities are, they are planning and they are executing landfill mining projects, but there was no proper guidelines on how to do that. There was no standard operating procedures. So why, and that's why I say that, how scientific knowledge is translating into policy, it's a very interesting thing, because by that time we didn't have any global examples where we were dealing with that kind of heterogeneous mixture of waste. Fortunately, this was one of the projects, or one of the uh, 50% or one portion of my thesis, where I actually took some samples from the Pirana dump site from Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. We were doing a project with them, and it was about how to use the fine soil like material into construction products. Now it's very easy to say that, but there's a lot of practical issues. For instance, there were presence of leachable metals, there were organic contaminants and other chemicals, and also civil engineers were not ready to use anything which is contaminated, and environmental engineers were pushing that we should use these material, otherwise it is just like a dislocated pollution. But because of the intervention of all these people, there was research done by Central Road Research Institute, and they found that okay, it is possible to use this material, the fine soil like material, in road construction. And we drafted a toolkit for the Indian cities. We trained around 400 municipal corporations across the country, and helped them understand what is legacy waste, how why it needs to be treated, what are the different ways it can be treated, and what are the best practices across the world, and what are the cost effective technologies that can be used in India. So this entire process of scientific excavation, sorting of the waste, bioremediation or spraying with the bioinoculum, and all these procedures is now well adopted by the Indian cities. Of course, it is done by the third party contractors, but the Indian cities, they have the capabilities and expertise to understand that okay, these are the good contractors, they will follow end to end solution. They'll not only excavate the waste and just say that okay, this is done, because the success of biomining process or landfill mining in India depends on how well you are using the excavated material or recovered material. Otherwise, it will just be a dislocated pollution that you are excavating material from one site and putting it in the nearby areas. So need for multidisciplinary and systemic thinking, I think. Informal sector role is very very crucial and also very unique to Indian context, and many of the emerging economy you will see it. So we have a set of a bunch of people who have very good skills in sorting the materials. Unfortunately, the cities which are doing good today, some of the cities, they have integrated the informal sector in their solid waste action plan in their cities. For instance, they have recruited these waste pickers in their material recovery facilities and other waste management uh, facilities. For instance, if you see, Pune is a classic example where they have the Municipal Corporation of Pune has a memorandum of understanding with Waste Pickers Cooperative, which is known as Swachh. And it's a women cooperative where they have collaborated with around 8,000 women waste pickers. I'm sorry, 4,000 women waste pickers, and they are catering the need of 70% of properties in Pune. They are doing the door to door collection. Now, these women will come to your doorstep. They'll collect the waste in a very dignified manner, and they will also educate the households that they should ideally segregate the waste into four sections, including wet waste, dry waste, sanitary waste, and domestic hazardous waste. Our solid waste management rules also mandate that at least three-way segregation should happen, and the Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0 has mandated that at least four-way segregation should happen. Now, we have some very interesting examples in our own country. For instance, Indore. Indore has invested a lot in information education and communication campaigns, and also on behavioral change campaigns. They have recruited a lot of NGOs and social scientists to bring that change in the community. And if you go there, if you ever get time to visit Indore, you will see that the community take a lot of pride in saying that okay, our city is the most cleanest city in the country, and they are so proudly segregating the waste into fractions, in their households. For instance, they're segregating into wet waste, dry waste, plastic waste, e-waste, sanitary waste, and domestic hazardous waste, which is commendable. Now, the entire process, I think, Surat, Indore, Bhopal, Ambikapur, Pune, all these cities are doing well because there's a lot of political willingness, there's a lot of administrative commitment and community engagement. So overall, if we look at it from the policy lens, I think the key discipline needed is we need engineers to design efficient systems, we need scientists to analyze material flows, economists to develop circular value chains, social scientists to influence behavior, and most importantly, the policymakers to convert these scientific knowledge into action. So it's waste management is a shared responsibility, and now is the time that it should not be, the policies should not be drafted in air conditioned room with few people. We need people like Pradeep Kalbar sir, and we need people like Swachh Cooperative, where the vulnerable voices are also heard, and the policies are made in such a way that it is not only cost effective, environmentally sound, but also socially inclusive, because that's the very beauty of the Indian solid waste management system, where 60 to 70% of the recycling is happening because of these informal sector, and we should not forget to integrate them in our solid waste management chain. So with this, I'd like to, so these are some of our policy research publications. We did studies on domestic hazardous waste, legacy waste management, integration of informal sector, and these are based on the best practices in the country, and also it has recommendation on how Indian cities can actually do this, can follow the best practices. And we were the first one to draft the state policy for environmentally sound treatment of sanitary pads. Then we also did some work in African countries. We had a collaboration with around 19 East African countries, and we are still working with them. So that's all from my side, and I would end my presentation with this quote. It's anonymous. It says, "Science is not just about technology; it provides the evidence, tools, and framework needed to prevent waste, not just treat it. It empowers policymakers to move from firefighting to foresight." Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richa. That was a very interesting presentation. We took much longer than expected, though, but I
So
didn't mind
sorry, I'm
because it
very
was
bad in time management.
no, that's okay. Both of you had really interesting presentations, and I was very interested to hear what you had to say. Um, we have time for a couple of quick questions. Are there any questions from the audience? You can send them in the chat or unmute yourselves.
Yeah,
Yes. Hi so much.
hi. Yeah, first of all, thank you for organizing this, and we rarely get to hear the Indian perspective on these topics, especially. It was quite enlightening and also inspiring. I had a question about waste management. You mentioned that Indian municipalities have to spend money to manage the waste, and segregation is the way to go ahead. So, what, according to you, are the current barriers or problems because of which segregation is not happening at the source?
I think the municipal corporations are currently relying more on technological interventions rather than information, education, and communication, as well as behavioral change campaigns. Now, it is the responsibility of corporation to, because there is a fund allocation for source enhancing the source segregation process also, and it is a behavioral change. It is something you just can't buy a technology and apply it and then source segregation will happen. This is something where we need to join hands with the NGOs, with the social scientists. So it is a time consuming process, probably due to which they think that, okay, this is not Indore and this will not happen, which is not true, because Indore, when they started doing it back in 2017. So they took 3 years to attain, whatever they are doing right now. They started with two-way segregation, then they, went to three-way segregation, 4 and now 6, and they piloted it in few wards, and then did it for the whole city. So I think the entire willingness of the corporation and investing in IEC BCC campaign is extremely critical, where they are missing the point, I believe, from my experience.
Nikhil has another question. Nikhil, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, again, thank you for the very interesting presentations, Dr. Richa and Professor Pradeep. I have like an open question to both of you actually. What is your take or like your perspective on valorizing these various municipal solid waste streams through incineration, like the bottom ash, or I mean, what is the push from the government or from the industry in valorizing these streams and making a business model out of it and promoting more industrial symbiosis through these waste streams? I'd like to know your takes on it.
Yes, Richa, you can go ahead.
Okay, so what I have understood from the question you're asking about the valorization, basically, it's not only limited to incineration but also to other treatment technologies, right? Nikhil,
Yes,
could you
yes.
repeat?
Not
Yeah,
only to incineration. Yes, yes. It's not
yeah.
only
So
incineration, it's to other.
technologies as well. Okay, so let me start with the most positive thing. So there's a great push about bio CNG. I hope we all are aware about it. Bio CNG, but then it needs 99.99% source segregated waste, because the performance of any technology depends on the quality of the feedstock. If your feedstock is good, the technology will work. If it's not good, it will not work. And period. I mean, no technology is like a magical stick that will segregate your waste and something will happen, because Indian waste is very different than what we get in US and other countries. So we eat a lot of organic waste and just contaminate the entire dry waste also. So but having said that, many cities are doing good in source segregation. For instance, Bhopal, Indore, Ambikapur, etc. Very small cities as well, and they are channelizing it to the bio CNG plant. Now there's great push by the government of India on installing the bio CNGs. Also from the agricultural residue waste, I will not get into details because I think I don't have much understanding about the agro waste sector. But municipal waste sector, of course, yes. For instance, Indore is generating from 550 tons of their municipal solid waste, which is organic in nature. They are converting that into 17,000 kilograms of bio CNG every day. So it's a big, it's a very sustainable business model, because all their city buses are deriving the fuel from the municipal solid waste plant only. So there's a great push. Government is pushing it big time. The other thing is your co-processing plants for the non-recyclable plastics or non-recyclable combustible material, uh, as well as industrial waste also, which is having significant calorific value. Government is pushing the industries as well as the municipal corporation to send these feedstock to the cement co-processing plants. There is a mandate and some mandatory percentage also. I can't tell you right now, but I mean, I can always share it with Soumya and she can share it with you. Like this much percentage of their waste, they need to get it treated in the cement co-processing plants. There is a proper EPR system as well in place. And apart from that, I think one more, I just am forgetting that. Um, yeah, incineration, thermal technologies. I have little biased view about it because I think as a scientist I should have a more open mind about incineration, because I feel it's a failed technology in India, though it is very successful in the Western world. But in apart from one or two or probably max three plants, none of the plants are functioning well in India. Probably because our waste characteristics are very different. We are receiving source mixed waste, not source segregated waste. And the bizarre thing is, most of these contractors are stating that they just give us mixed waste, give us the full contract, and we don't care about if it's segregated or non-segregated. We'll just burn them. So this is, I feel that this is against the idea of circular economy, where more emphasis should be on upcycling rather than burning of the waste. So but still, I think many of the cities are seeing it as a quick fix, something where source segregation is not required. But unfortunately it is not working so well in many of the cities. But yet again, a big push by the government of India. So yeah, that's my stand. Sir, if you want to add something, you can.
Yeah. So this I agree on the incineration part. It's a solution, but its solution requires a lot of background work. Unless that is done, it is just people are selling any technology like waste to energy and all, but very difficult to get success. And as I said, municipalities like to hear that I can, means you go and present that, okay, and tell that, okay, tomorrow I can solve this problem. They like that kind of, presentations. They don't want a presentation like Richa and I go and say that, okay, let us work for next 5 years. Let us create a community drive. Let us do the outreach. You may not get the next appointments. That's the storyline.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you,
I just have
Nick.
a small. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, go
Yeah,
on.
sorry, Soumya. No. Thank you for the response. I just have a small follow-up question, like with the waste to incineration plants being promoted as a quick fix solution, and they're also not so successful so far. Is it also because like the waste heat has also not been valorized? Like for instance, there's a lot of I think in most European countries they use it for district heating, but here in India, due to our hot temperature, how hot climates, we don't exactly need district heating, but it could be used for, say, pharmaceutical industries or any other manufacturing industries. Is that kind of system integrated approach is? Do you think that is also kind of missing in India currently?
Yes, it is. It is because their entire focus is on converting the heat into electricity, which again comes with a lot of losses. Whereas that the one that you are mentioning, it is more efficient, I believe. But that has not been. I mean, I have not seen any that kind of intervention as of today in Indian cities. Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Thank you. Yeah, that's it from my side. Yeah.
Thank you for your question, Nikhil and Solange. Unfortunately, we are at the end of the session here, but thank you so much, Dr. Richa and Professor Pradeep. It was very insightful, very interesting discussion. We also have a comment about your talks on the chat. So I would like to conclude the session here. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and thank you again to the speakers.
Thank you. Thanks for organizing.
Thank you so much, Soumya. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
But thank you for organizing.